The key points of the human history talk. I'd say the first point I'm obviously trying to make is that human history, as in organised humans being together, living together, making tools, making pottery artefacts, buying and selling things. We tend to think back only as far as maybe the Greeks or the Egyptians, which takes us back to about 3500 BC. And that's how we think about history. For whatever reason, it's as far back as your education mostly takes you. But in fact, of course, we go back to an Ice Age pottery 29,000 years ago, 27,000 years BC, in ancient Europe. And that's amazing, I think, that there were people gathered there, several hundred of them, making all these pottery items and trading with each other. We know that people were coming from up to 200 kilometres away to buy and sell the goods that were being made at this place 29,000 years ago. So that's one of the points, is that our history goes back a lot further than we might think it does, our actual organised history. And that takes us to another main point, is this idea of when most of our megalithic structures we know were started around, say, 3200 BC, and I think by 2600 BC they were finished. But about the oldest megalithic structure on Earth is thought to be in Malta. It's a Maltese temple, and it's dated to 3500 BC. Now, it's important first of all to realise that none of these dates are necessarily accurate. We don't have any real way of dating any of these stone items and finding out genuinely when they were there. And quite apart from that, of course, I talk about a place called Göbekli Tepe, which is in Turkey. And at the moment it's made up of 40 or 50 uncovered standing stones, which are between 3 and 13 feet high. They've been carved with pictures of scorpions and snakes and ducks, all manner of birds. And they're set out in sort of circles that raise out of the ground. They're a truly amazing structure, and we've got no idea when these things were built or carved or assembled. We do know that apart from the 40 or 50 that have already been dug up, there are another 250 still underground. So there are many circles of these things all interlocking with each other, like a kind of, they look like big gear wheels but made out of standing stones. And as if that isn't amazing enough, it is quite evident that 400 stones, easily the biggest megalithic site on planet Earth, or will be when it's fully uncovered. But the most amazing thing about it is that it was deliberately buried. So it's big enough to make 3 whole hills of soil. That's what it looked like when they found it. It was 3 natural looking hills, and underneath it is this amazing buried complex. And it was apparently buried using domestic infill, although as far as I can gather the infill contains very little information about the people that were doing the job. And there was some vegetation attached to some of the stones when it was buried, and this means they've got a relatively good carbon date for the date it was buried, and they think it was buried, I think it was 10,000 years ago, or it might have been 10,000 BC, 12,000 years ago. So in other words, this huge megalithic site on Göbekli Tepe was buried 6,500 years before our oldest site is thought to have come into existence. So you see, we're really starting to question the timeline of history as it's being laid out. I think that's one of the most important things about the talk. And that, if you like, is the theme that runs all the way through it. I think there's another theme, which is this idea that there has been something much bigger happening on planet Earth before we came along. There's a feeling all the way through the history talk and through the alchemy talk that what we're actually witnessing is our memory of a knowledge that's come over to us through time from a numerate culture, from a culture that understood number and geometry, and it understood the size of the planet Earth and all manner of things. There's all sorts of clues, and that's one of the things that comes out in the history talk. I think the third and final thing that's important about it is that it shows how our ideas change. So the history talk kicks off when Earth was born 4,500 million years ago, a really amazing amount of time. And yet in Shakespeare's time, in Elizabethan period, they only thought the Earth was 6,000 years old. They thought it was created in 4004 BC. So there's a lot of difference between thinking the world's 6,000 years old and being pretty sure that it actually is 4,500 million years old. That is a massive change of mind on behalf of the scientific establishment. And that's what we see science doing, changing all the time. So that's, I think, another of the important lessons from this talk, and also that clearly in the past we were capable of doing things that we cannot do today. The talk quite clearly shows one or two sites where their engineering feats have been pulled off, like the putting of the stones, the 3,000 or 1,200 ton stones on the Baalbek platform. There is no way we could move those stones nowadays without breaking them. Even if we could move them, they would tend to break, because stones that big are quite brittle. So quite definitely we can see little hints through this talk that in the past we could do things that we can't do today, which means that we have not necessarily grown from, you know, the simple up to the complex and the erudite. We might have spent the last couple of thousand years, the last 5,000 years, forgetting what we're here for.